Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today on this tech talk on Genie AI. I see we've got a good few people joined. I imagine we'll get people still trickling in from other meetings and things. I don't remember the last time I was on a Teams meeting that actually finished on time. The recording and everything's going to follow afterwards. So if people do miss the little intro at the start, they'll be able to catch that later. But we'll make a start. Got a few bits to get through today. Let's jump into it. Welcome. Just as by way of a quick introduction for myself, so I'm Gareth Richards. I'm a principal consultant at Telefónica Tech. I've been working in the data and analytics and engineering space for about 12 years now. 9 years of that, last 9 years in consulting, so covering a range of different kinds of projects, data platform implementations, database migrations, data analytics use cases, and data modeling across public and private sectors. So done a lot of work with kind of retail, hospitals, police and justice, local government, pretty much everything that there is out there really. And I am joined today by Ross, who's going to do a quick intro.
Hey Gareth, hi everyone on the call. I'm Ross. I've been at Heathrow for 4 years, over 4 years. I joined just after COVID, which was a really interesting time to join an airport. But I am responsible for managing our centralized data and technology stack, which I'll go into a bit more detail during the Heathrow Spotlight session later on the webinar. But hi everyone, really happy to join the call, and excited to share with you our approach to Genie and AI more broadly.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Ross. So a couple of quick notes on usual housekeeping stuff. So we will share out the slides and the recording of the session within the next kind of 48 hours after the event. Please do use the Q&A function in the meeting to ask any questions. We've got quite a bit to get through, hence I think everyone's kind of in listening mode, but please do ask questions. We'll try and pick things up as we go along. Everything we'll kind of aim to kind of give an answer to as well. So please do kind of put thoughts and questions in the chat or the Q&A function. There shouldn't be hopefully any interruptions. We've got the next kind of hour or so to run through everything. A quick spin through the agenda. As we've just done, kind of welcomes and introductions and so on, that we've just kind of gone through and covered. We're going to jump into having a look at Databricks Genie AI. So we'll talk a little bit about what it is and what it can be used for, a bit about how it works, and its kind of intended uses and benefits, and a little bit about kind of what's happening under the hood. You know, is your data being shared? What's happening to your data? How is it interacting with it? And so on and so forth. So we'll do a good run through of that. Then we'll get a bit into what it looks like. So we'll do a demo. I'll basically go through and set up a Genie space. We'll show a little bit of kind of doing the configuration, a bit about how it behaves and how it responds to kind of tweaking and adjusting the configuration, and how we monitor kind of quality of what it's outputting and how people are using it. And hopefully cover a few things about how we make sure that it works well. It's fairly straightforward, as you'll see, to kind of go in and set up a Genie space. But one of the key things is making sure it's doing what it needs to do. What can we do as data practitioners to make sure that it's functioning in the best way and business is getting the most out of it? We'll do a customer spotlight. So as Ross says, he's joining from Heathrow Airport. We'll give a bit of some insight into how that organisation is working with Genie, and looking to roll that out across the organisation. And importantly, kind of the customer take on, obviously it's an AI tool. So how we put trust in AI and how we get good quality output, and how we might do things as organisations to make sure that we've got that trust in these kind of outputs. A quick bit at the end on roadmap and what's next. what Genie is good at now, and what's coming in the future. And then hopefully some time for Q&A. So for us to have a little look at what's come through in the chat, and try and pick out some of those questions for some answers on the session. But as I say, if we get lots of questions, we don't get through them all, then we'll get some output on those afterwards. Okay, so jumping straight into it then, what is Genie? What is Genie AI in Databricks? It's a few things really. So one of the main things is that it's a conversational BI tool. So the creation of a Genie space within Databricks is the creation of a essentially what looks very much like a chatbot, where you can talk to it about your data, ask it questions about your business, and how it's performing. And for people who are perhaps less interested in engaging in more traditional kind of static BI tools, reports, etc., and who maybe just want to go in and ask the odd question here and there, or maybe something that isn't answered in the reporting that's available, and just want to explore the data and try and dig into what's happening across the business, you can do that with natural language, and it provides an interface for that. On top of that, there's an API that sits on top of those Genie spaces. So if you've got tools, apps and agents that you want to be able to interact with data, rather than having to point them to all of your data and make all of that accessible, and build into that tool the ability to comprehend the information that's there, you might want to make a Genie space available to your apps and agents so that they can interact with data and submit prompts to Genie and have Genie respond and provide the information back. So there's a whole API to do that and to effectively programmatically interact with Genie spaces once you've configured them. And then down at the bottom there, so if you've got AI BI dashboards within Databricks, when you configure those and you bring data into a dashboard, Databricks will automatically create you a Genie space that's associated with that. And then you can ask further questions as you're exploring your dashboards. So again, those kind of ad hoc queries that we sometimes get as data practitioners, you've put lots of effort into scoping a report and building kind of BI tools to enable people to interact with data, but someone's always got a little bit of a follow-up, or that visual's good, but what if it just adds that extra element, or I want to see that sliced by something that you don't have a slicer for, and so on and so forth, which ordinarily would be a request to either export the data so someone can do their own analysis, or asking for the report to be amended with kind of small little tweaks, which do stack up for data teams, and might be something that someone's going to kind of look at once and then go, oh, actually, that's not really helpful for me, so I'm not going to look at that again. Those kind of ad hoc queries and things that can sometimes add up to taking up quite a lot of time. Actually, users can just ask that question of Genie, and Genie will provide that information, provide that additional breakdown of the data, and if it becomes something really useful, then data practitioners can go and take that and build that into something kind of more permanent, or if it's not that interesting, didn't provide the information that was required, or that the user thought they were going to get from that, then it can be discarded, and there's no wasted effort there. So 3 different ways of interacting with Genie as kind of an overall tool within the Databricks space. We're going to focus mostly on the first category within the session today. So looking specifically at, we're creating a Genie space. We're looking at a particular, business domain and putting a Genie space around that, and how that works and how we configure that. There's plenty of documentation around the API and interacting with that Genie space via API once you've configured it. And yeah, if anyone's interested in kind of any follow-up on perhaps those last 2, then please do put in the chat. I'm sure we'll be happy to put kind of further sessions in to dig a little deeper into some of the other elements of Genie. So what does that mean kind of in practice? Well, imagine, I suppose we've got a Databricks platform. We've already gone through the process of setting up that platform, ingesting lots of data, working through the normal medallion architecture, getting to a stage where we've got our kind of gold level data that's already been brought together and is already being used in, as it says there, we've got enterprise reporting and BI, typical kind of analytics stack, where you've got those kind of data products, data models, etc., being used for analytics and reporting. As we said, we're going to have some questions that are coming out of people's use of those tools, or perhaps questions that are coming out from the business, which we then want to get the answer to, and it goes beyond what's currently in those kind of fixed tools. So we can take that data and we can point the Genie space at it, and in a few minutes I'll show you what that looks like in practice. What's happening under the hood though is that we've got users asking questions, so they'll go into the interface and they'll ask a question. What was my revenue last year? What was our average average time to complete a project? Any natural language kind of question that they've got, and that question will be pointed at a Genie space. So a Genie space, when we configure it, will contain information about data that we've got within Databricks, governed by Databricks. Unity Catalog still applies, and so on. All the tables and views that we point to, that we point Genie at, will the metadata that sits around those tables will be visible to Genie. Genie will be able to see what kind of data is in the tables. If we add comments, tags, etc., to columns and the tables themselves, then that will all be visible. So that metadata that's really useful for Genie to be able to interpret what's in the tables that it's looking at. Genie will have all of that available. And then any additional instructions or prompts that we provide to Genie, instructions about how tables should be joined together, sample SQL queries or SQL expressions to calculate particular things. All of that kind of guidance that we can provide to Genie in the configuration to say this is how you should interpret our data, is all contained within the Genie space, contained within the Genie knowledge store. And anytime a user comes along and asks a question, Genie will start by gathering up all of that information alongside the question, and it will kick all of that across to Azure OpenAI. It doesn't provide any data to Azure OpenAI. And this is where I think probably one of the biggest benefits, and where I think Databricks have got Genie right, is that what it's not doing is it's not providing an LLM with all of the information about your business, all the data from that you've got within Databricks, and all of this kind of metadata and so on, and then saying to the LLM, just give me the answer to this question. So you haven't got a model sitting there that's having to absorb all of that information, absorb all of the data itself, maybe sitting there running off to the internet and finding public information about your business and adding that into the mix as well, and then coming back to you with, oh, your revenue last year was X. What it's actually doing is it's saying to OpenAI, here's information about what the user wants. Here's information about the data that we've got. Can you give me a SQL query that I can run against these tables in Databricks and will work, which is quite important, but will give me the answer that this user is requiring? And that's quite a different prospect to just go into an LLM and saying, I'd like to know what our revenue was last year. I think it makes it more secure, because we're not having to share data out. I think it makes it more accurate and more consistent in our experience of using it. And it also makes it more auditable, because it's really clear for and we'll look at the monitoring tab when we get into the demonstration, but it's always really clear exactly what Genie's doing, exactly what query is being run, how the data is being returned, and if someone wanted to replicate Genie's answer, they could just take the query and run it against the data, and they'll get exactly the same response.
I think, Gareth, just to add something onto that, for us as well, it's about traceability, and it's exactly like you said. It might go to the open internet and find an answer to a question that you've put in if you're using a much more open AI or open LLM model to do that. I think with this, we know that it can only have got an answer from the data that we provisioned to Genie. So, and for us, traceability is a huge thing, because if you do go to the open web, you might get numerous different answers, or a website that it's located information from might have changed, might have updated. Then, well, who's updated that website? And again, it's just not in your control. So I think for us, traceability is a huge benefit of something like Genie.
I absolutely agree on that. And because under the hood, what it's doing is then returning a SQL query, and that's being applied to the data in Databricks. Aside from the fact that you know that exactly what query's been run, it's all auditable, you know when the query was run, you know which conversation in which Genie space, which user, etc. Asked for that information and what information was returned. Unity Catalog also completely applies. So although the query will be a general query to go and ask the question of Databricks, the query is actually run against the data as the user who's logged into Genie. So if you've got any row filtering that's applied to your data within Databricks, particular users who have access to look at maybe revenue data for only certain parts of the business, or maybe you've got a Genie space around HR and you only want people to be able to see people who they're the line manager for. If you've applied those rules as row filtering within Unity Catalog, then that all gets respected by Genie. So Genie is going to come back and respond and say, here's the data as per your request, and it will have queried and filtered it according to all those permissions. So again, it adds to that kind of secure, trusted element around the data that means that you're not just running a query and then getting some data back and you don't know where it's come from. All of your governance and assurance that you've done around your data within Unity Catalog all gets applied. Last important bit to highlight just at the end is then about feedback. So the user is going to receive a response. They're going to look at the answer that Genie has provided. They can see the code that was run, and they can see the logical steps that Genie has gone through to kind of interpret the prompt and then provide the SQL query back and the results. The user has the opportunity to say whether they think this is the correct answer or not. Has Genie interpreted the business requirement correctly, and so on? And you can either say, no, it's not correct, or yes, it is correct, or you can submit it for review. So maybe your end users can say, I'm not sure whether this is right or not. You can ask a data practitioner to review it. And again, we'll go through in a moment and look at what that looks like in practice, which I think is coming up straight away. There we go. So what does that actually look like once we get into Databricks itself? So I've got a testing space set up. So quick shout out to Databricks Free Edition, which is genuinely free and really useful for kind of going in and exploring features that you're maybe not so familiar with. So highly recommend that people do set up a Databricks Free Edition space to go and do that. Genie lives over here on the left. So I'm going to start with just creating a fairly simple Genie space. We don't have tons of time, so I'll kind of go through the process. Dead easy to do though. Just hit new up in the top right. I've already got a bit of data that I've put into a testing catalog based on the New York taxi standard sample data set, which I've just popped into a table. And I can just select the table that I want and hit create. If you've got lots of tables, you can select various different tables or views or metric views or any combination of those up to a maximum of 20. And I'll touch a little bit later on why I think that's a useful maximum to have. But you can select the tables that you want and just simply create it. And that's basically it. I'll hit Start Warehouse at the top because it uses the SQL Serverless Warehouse to actually run the queries. So we'll let that tick off. But that's literally it. If you didn't want to provide any further guidance to Genie, something fairly simple like this, it's quite a small table, not hugely complex in terms of business requirements. That's it. You've got a Genie space. You can start asking it questions. You can ask simple stuff like explain the data set to me. And that's a pretty standard one that comes along and is made available. You can see it's provided us with some information about the table, tells us what's in that table. Helpfully, if I just expand out into the catalog and go and navigate to that table, Unity catalog. It's mostly for that picking up information that I've got added into the description, and you can see we've got some comments added in as well. These are really easy to add in just within the interface using the kind of Databricks assistant. It will provide you with some kind of boilerplate stuff that it's used to interpret that. I've worked with customers where we've spent quite a lot of time actually going through and providing important context around what is within the data model. And that's actually really helpful for Genie to be able to understand the context of the data. So well worth investing some time in kind of providing that metadata that will help Genie to be more accurate in its responses. Going back to Genie, I mentioned we have the opportunity to respond. So is this correct? Yes, it is. And that goes off as a response. And if I jump into the monitoring tab, you can see I've got the history of what's been run, and you can see that the users marked that as good. And again, this is all kind of contained within system tables, so you can go and query that, and you can put some metrics around how well your Genie space is performing. Just go back to our chat. So you can see it's prompting me down at the bottom with kind of some sample questions, which it does, which is always very nice. And if I click on that, I'll get Genie just to come back with a response to a fairly basic question. Have a little think about that for a moment. Found the data. Obviously, there's only one table, so that's fairly straightforward ask. But now we've got a few more options, so we can see our analysis. So you can see it's found the data, calculated based on these steps. So as I mentioned before, you can kind of review and understand what Genie's doing as it's going along. And if I click Show Code on the right-hand side, we can see the SQL that has been run. And again, that's a key part of that kind of traceability and auditability, because this is all visible to administrators of the Genie space, and they'll be able to kind of come along. And if someone raises an issue with Genie's response, then they can go and run that SQL as well, see what's incorrect with it, and then take steps to add to the instructions for the Genie space to make sure that it interprets things correctly, which we're going to do a little bit of now. So I'm going to imagine for a moment that I'm not particularly interested in the kind of the cents. So obviously this is New York, so we've got dollars, but I'm not really interested in cents. And maybe I want our financial measures, regardless of what they are, to always be shown to the nearest dollar. So I can provide that instruction. I could ask Genie here to say, oh, can you just round that to the nearest dollar? But when you provide that information within the context of a conversation, Genie won't always remember that. We don't have Genie space isn't a kind of one singular persisted LLM that is always going to remember everything about you unless you provide that information in the instructions. So just because you said in this conversation you want it rounded, it's not going to remember that next time. Those kind of standardized rules, standardized instructions we want it to respect every time are things that we need to provide Genie with as part of the configuration. So I go to configure up at the top, go to instructions. You can see I can put in some basic text instructions, which I've prepared already, and I can just add something in and always display currency rounded to 0 decimal points. And you can put as much in here as you want to. I would suggest caution. Don't put loads in. If this becomes War and Peace, like huge prompt coming in here, Genie's got to evaluate that every time, and that's not always particularly helpful. And it's easy with a very long prompt to get kind of contradictory with it. So we've got other options if we start to get into more detailed instructions, which I'll come on to in a second. But let's jump into, I'll create a new chat just to make sure it's respecting the latest instructions. Let's ask what the average fare amount is again. Let it respond, and hopefully it should now come to 0 decimal points. Yeah, wonderful. Love it when a demonstration actually works. So that's good. We've provided it with some basic text instructions, but we've got lots of other options along here within the configure area. And one area that I will mention specifically in the context of this fairly simple space is SQL expressions. So imagine that we've got business semantics. So we'll put aside metric views for a moment, but thinking about semantics of the business. So the way that we talk about our data sometimes is not immediately obvious from kind of just from the table data itself. And sometimes we have terminology that Genie's not going to understand. And we'll imagine for a moment that as people who are looking at this data, we've got one really important metric that we always call KPI1 because it's our number one KPI. Obviously, if I ask Genie what KPI1 is, it will have a go. I've got something in mind for what I want KPI1 to be, which is something kind of like an average rate per mile. But that's what KPI1 is. I'm going to ask Genie, and Genie's not going to have any idea that by that I mean an average rate per mile. It's just going to come back with this kind of stuff, and it might have a go. I was trying this out yesterday, and it did have a stab at what KPI1 might be, and it just gave me a count of taxi rides. But in this instance, it's come back and said, I don't know what you mean by KPI1. So I can add an expression where we can say, I've got a measure, and the name of this measure is going to be KPI1, and that measure is going to be a bit of SQL based on total fare amount divided by total distance. I give it some synonyms, so different people around the business might call it something slightly different, so I can give it that. And I can give it some text-based instructions if I need to, which is pretty optional. So I can save that. That's added that in as a measure. Again, I'm going to open a new chat to make sure in the context it's picking up the new instructions. Ask the same question again, and it should now know what I'm talking about. So it's understood my time frame. Let's come back with a number. I'm happy that it's definitely the number that I want. Show code. There we go. So it's taken the syntax that I've provided. It's done a bit of adjustment, which is fine, because it's actually a little bit more robust. It's dealing with the scenario of divide by 0. It's also rounding as per my text instructions. So it's not just doing a straightforward, oh, you said to do this code, so I'll do it. With the SQL expressions, it's a little bit more robust than that. But I can see that's pretty much what I wanted. It now understands what I mean by KPI1, and it's done it for the right time frame. And if I explore my analysis, then yeah, I can see the steps that it's taken along the way. So really helpful for applying kind of specific measures, and you can see within here we've got like filters and other dimensions and so on. So plenty that we can do with SQL expressions, which is really helpful. I'll do a quick look at benchmarks. So thinking specifically about scenarios where we want to monitor quality of Genie outputs over time. So if we've got a Genie space and maybe we've got like effectively what becomes a standard set of tests to be able to say, we know we've got a set of standard questions that should have a ground truth. So that should be able to say, if Genie is performing well, it will answer this question in this way and provide this answer. So we can add benchmarks that apply that logic, and then as practitioners, we can come in, run the benchmarks, and make sure that it's continuing to do well with its interpretation. We can add something simple in, like, what is the value of KPI1? Generate some SQL to develop our ground truth SQL answer, which I'll do for speed, but you can come in and just bring your own SQL, as this is the ground truth for this question. And then I can come along and add that as a benchmark. You can have loads of those around all the different like key questions that you want to have these ground truths to be able to test the quality of Genie. I can run all benchmarks, and then it will sit there, spin through if you've got lots of different questions, and it will do us a quick comparison. So we'll go think about that, get the answer, and what we should see is it come along side by side, where it will say, this is my response as of right now, running that as just a new query, and then this is my response as per what you said is the ground truth, and it will check whether the answers are the same in both, which it has. And if they're different, you might realize they're different because actually your ground truth is out of date, so you can update ground truth. Or if it's incorrect, you can then dig into why is it incorrect, and then maybe add to the instructions and so on, to be able to provide more accurate responses. I will very quickly, just because we're a little light on time, I'll just come back to one of the other starter spaces. So when you create a Databricks free edition, Bakehouse Sales starter space is one that comes along automatically with the free edition. So this is again based on some like standardized data. You can see tables have already been added in and so on. I'll use this one just to show you a couple of the other instructional elements which are really useful within here. So one is about joins. So Genie can look at your tables and interpret those and say, oh, I can see that there's shared columns across the different tables, and use that to join data within SQL. But you might want to be more explicit than that. There's two ways to be more explicit by that within that. One is when you're modeling data within Databricks in Unity Catalog, use primary and foreign key constraints, and Genie will understand those and bring those in automatically as joins. So when you add tables that have foreign key relationships, the joins will automatically be listed here. If there aren't, you can come into joins and you can add them manually. So fairly straightforward data modeling practice. Pick up your tables and pick up your fields that you want to join the tables on, and do one to many and save that. And then that will save that. So again, every time you're asking Genie to generate generate the answer to a question, it will be able to provide those joins across. And SQL queries is just one where you can provide a more detailed, complex SQL query, and Genie will be able to use that as an example for particular questions. So really helpful to give Genie a bit more of an insight into how to interpret the data. Before we jump over to Ross, I'll just quickly show something that's fairly new, which is Databricks 1. So obviously the interface here within Databricks, it's quite busy. There's quite a lot down the side from a data engineering, SQL catalog, etc. point of view. For business users, it can be a bit overbearing. Databricks 1 is new and provides a more kind of trimmed down interface for business users. So any apps, dashboards, and Genie spaces are available within Databricks 1. All of that busyness goes away, and we can just jump into kind of Genie spaces and so on, and then go and start answering questions. And it's just a little bit cleaner, which is nice. And will, I think, help break down some barriers to adoption. So as I'm running a little bit over, we will breeze through these fairly quickly. So I've already mentioned most of these, but in terms of making Genie work well, one key thing, invest in your underlying data model. So make those relationships, model the data, provide the comments. It will help Genie interpret the data. User requirements are key. And there's a couple of points here, but one of the biggest ones is around user acceptance testing. So where we've had most success with Genie has been where we've conducted proper user acceptance testing, used all of those kind of feedback functionalities, and got the responses from people around the accuracy, and then built user requirements into the instructions that are provided. That really helps the performance of Genie and the accuracy of Genie, and builds trust in it, which is important. I mentioned the 20 table/view limit. Don't try and create one Genie space that contains all of your organization's data. Do split into multiple Genie spaces for different domains. If you want one overall chatbot to rule them all that knows everything about your business, then you can use Agent Bricks to bring together a single supervising agent across lots of Genie spaces. Which again, too much for this session, but definitely a possibility. But Genie works really well when it's targeted at particular domains. And version control. So do keep your instructions and configuration within something like Git, just to make sure that you don't kind of lose things, because they are quite kind of contained within the Databricks interface, and it is helpful to be able to go back and look at previous versions. So a little bit rushed at the end there, and we run a little bit over, so my apologies, but let's jump into a conversation with Ross. So I'm going to take the screen share down a little bit, yeah, so Ross, it would be great if you wouldn't mind starting with just a little bit on your kind of journey with Heathrow and what Heathrow's doing at the moment before we talk a little bit more about Genie in particular.
Yeah, 100%. Really good demo, by the way. I very rarely see demos run so smoothly when they're done live. So really good work. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard something. Yeah, hi everyone. So just a bit more background on myself. So I'm Ross. I look after our centralized data and technology stack, which is predominantly Databricks with the medallion architecture, with a bit of Microsoft on top through Microsoft Purview and Power BI. I have maybe the unenviable task of bringing together adoption of a centralized platform, the business change that goes alongside that, making sure that it's got the relevant cyber assurances, the data compliance assurances, making sure that it's not costing too much, whilst also trying to drive adoption as much as possible. And just to give an update on Heathrow, particularly this year, because we're going through some quite fundamental change, particularly in the data and digital transformation space. So we actually hired our first CDO around 9 months ago, I believe, to really help support Heathrow accelerate how we use data and how we use AI and potentially use AI. We're really building out the right capability at the moment. So we're bringing in data engineers, data scientists. We have our first ever AI lead. We have a new head of data governance as well. So everything that can help support Heathrow drive a lot of value from the platform that we've been developing over the past few years. So just for awareness, the past few years, our strategy to date has been to democratize data into a central platform. Heathrow is ripe with so much data in so many different places. So our strategy has always been to centralize access to data and the governance around data. And now the investment we've made over the last couple of years, we're in a really good position to look at how we bring in the right people and processes to unlock data and the value of data at scale. Now, with a new CDO, obviously comes a new data strategy. And that strategy at the moment really sees AI as a core pillar. So we're really looking to see how can we harness AI to revolutionize passenger experience, operational efficiency, commercial performance, all sorts of different areas for AI. I think there's a real feeling for us at Heathrow that AI could set the new standards for how we do things. We're looking to challenge assumptions and really, I guess, push the boundaries with what we can do with data and AI. And our general approach to AI at the moment has been to firstly streamline the number of AIs that were approved for use at Heathrow. So we've really gone for, I guess, quality over quantity. The goal here is that we use it responsibly. We don't make shortcuts or we don't take risks we don't need to. So we have an approved list of AIs that we're using. at Heathrow, and they allow us to keep data secure, segregated, and well governed. You have to remember that as one of the busiest airports in the world and a vital part of the UK's national infrastructure, we have to prioritise safety at every level in every decision that we make. And there are a number of AI tools out there. AI is everywhere, and it's getting more and more advanced by the minute. And it is important. I know Gareth touched on this earlier. It's important to remember that when you type something into a public AI tool, it's not private anymore, and that's a huge watch out for us at Heathrow, and why we've looked to establish certain approved AI tools at Heathrow. It just gives us the confidence that those outputs are safe, they're controlled, we have lineage, we can track them, and that they align to our wider standards around safety. In terms of Genie rooms, so we rolled out Genie rooms earlier this year. And to begin with, we wanted to understand Genie a bit better. We spoke a lot with Databricks themselves to understand the security wrapper around Genie rooms and how we can safely begin deploying Genie. And so we just want to make sure that there was safety around how Genie interacts with the data that we have in our Databricks platform. And we began looking at identifying some data sets which would be suitable for some light experimentation. I remember I did something around I think looking at how many alcoholic beverages were sold on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve or something, just to see how quickly Genie could get an understanding of the data that you put into it. And it was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. I remember how many steps I would have had to have taken with a dashboard or using my own sort of sandpit environment to get that answer, whereas Genie got that answer almost sort of instantly and gave what felt like quite a good answer in terms of how many products we sold on that day. So really began testing Genie in a controlled environment, didn't use any sensitive or internal data, and it was absolutely isolated away from any sort of production workloads or anything. So we wanted to begin looking at the safety side and the trust side of Genie. Alongside that, we then wanted to look at what are the practical ways in which we can produce reliable results. Trust is a huge thing for us. So we began running some small scale experiments with a few use cases, so operational insights and reporting support. And we were really then beginning to scrutinize and check the accuracy and the usefulness of those responses that were being generated by AI. So that was the next step for us to understand how we can actually integrate such an AI assistant into our data workflows whilst maintaining quality, whilst maintaining trust in the responses that Genie was giving us. And the next step for us, and where we want to unlock the potential benefits of Genie, is really for that non-technical audience and wider teams, and how we might integrate Genie through wider tooling. So interfaces that people are much more familiar with, whether that be something like Microsoft Teams or something else, because we really see the benefit is in democratizing access to data to the non-technical users. Not everybody will even really know much about Databricks, but who will still absolutely want to be able to query and utilize data at Heathrow. So for us, it's can we broaden the adoption of trusted Genie responses in a wider sort of UI interface ecosystem, where we can bring on board a lot more users to start utilizing the data that we've been building up over the past few years into this centralized data platform. But we need to get to a point where we're confident in the reliability. But there's no doubting that Genie could become, a real productivity multiplier across the business. As I say, it makes me think how much time and how many steps I would save. And I think with a typical dashboard or report, there's only so much that a report can show, right? There's only so many KPIs or so many metrics, and people inevitably will always come along with their own niche question or their own domain context that they want to ask questions of that data. And Genie's great because you don't then have to necessarily understand the tool or the UI that you're looking at and understand how it's been built and which filters to use and when and all that kind of thing. It absolutely could be a productivity multiplier for us at Heathrow. Again, so long as we can trust and have confidence in any answers that it's giving to that non-technical non-technical audience. One of the things we found, and I'm really passionate about, is putting the users at the center. It's clear that users like to interact with data in a much more natural conversational way rather than navigating through, diagrams, dashboards, reports, etc. And we found something really interesting. We did a POC with Neo4j, actually, where we built a holistic view of all of the stand changes that happen per flight. And there's a frightening amount of provisional stand changes that are made by flight. If you imagine, it only really takes one delayed flight for that aircraft not to be on stand at the time we thought it was, and then the whole remaining day's schedule can go out the window. So actually there's a lot of change throughout a day in terms of which flights end up on which stands at which time. And when a flight doesn't go on the stand we expected it to, for whatever reason, you then have to move all of the resources, the catering. It might end up in a different terminal. Then you have to plan how to repatriate those passengers to the relevant terminals and how to get home. And there's a lot of work that goes around stand changes, and stand changes can be so common. And Neo4j was really, really good at just visualizing, sort of showing that pictorial view of how many stand changes for an individual flight there really are. Like it was incredible. But what users then wanted to be able to do was just ask the very simple questions. Well, how many stand changes? I don't want to have to look at the interface and acknowledge and necessarily count all of this. Just tell me quickly how many changes have, how many stand changes have occurred for this day, and which stands are currently free for the next hour, in case people need to very quickly make decisions on when to repatriate a flight. What does our stand availability look like right now, because I need to make a decision super quick. I actually haven't really got the time to log in or view a dashboard and then put some filters or apply some metrics on it to get the answer I need. I need that very rapid insight to getting the answer that I want. So in summary, we are doing a lot of experimentation. We're really looking to validate and I guess make sure that we roll out Genie not just to be a kind of say a gimmick tool where we don't trust the answers that it's giving. I think there's huge productivity gains to be had by utilizing Genie, but we just need to make sure that we roll it out in firstly a safe and responsible way, but secondly make sure that we have confidence in the answers that it's providing to what could be a substantial wider audience that it is right now. But we need to invest the time in getting our data in the right state before we begin democratizing it more widely from our platform.
Awesome, thank you, Ross. Yeah, really welcome that insight on kind of where Heathrow's at in that journey of using Genie and AI generally as well. And I think to pick up on your point around trust, I think that's that comes out time and again, and it's not, in fairness, just an AI thing. When we've done implementations of new tools, whether that's maybe a switch of BI tooling, people who've used the same kind of tools for years with the same kind of data, they know it, they trust it, they're happy with it. You provide a new tool that it's different interface, and people do, I think, have that initial kind of difficulty in trusting something new. It's quite an important element of change management. And then I guess the risk often is that someone will try out the new tool, they'll get an answer, then they'll go back to the old tool, make sure that the answer is the same, and hopefully, if we've all done our jobs right, then it is all the same. But that kind of trust, not just from an organizational risk perspective, but also can be a bit of a productivity killer if people aren't brought along on the journey as well. Is there anything that I suppose that you're doing in particular around that to kind of build trust among business users and end users of kind of new tools as you're rolling them out?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think we are Heathrow very much in a place of needing to just trust the data. So almost to begin with, agnostic of the tool that we're presenting, whether that be through Genie, whether that be in a Power BI certified dashboard or something. Heathrow have been in a very decentralized model for some time. and therefore governance has been really tricky. I use the same example every single time, but if you ask various different people how many flights flew for a given year, the likelihood is you'll probably get quite a few different answers, and that's okay if it's in different contexts. But there'll be a belief that one answer is correct and other answers aren't. But then we spend so much time scrutinizing, well, what is the right answer? How did we get to that answer? Where's the lineage? How do we track that? And therefore, how do we actually trust that this is the actual answer that we should be presenting outwardly to other stakeholders and other organizations and such? So the real emphasis will actually be on the underlying data itself. I think with things like Genie, there's obviously concerns around just AI in general, like skepticism around AI, its general accuracy and reliability. And that might come from other tools. That might be people using OpenAI, ChatGPT, and they've found some really interesting answers that didn't quite marry up. And then suddenly, well, Genie, is this just another version of something that I've used in my private life, which I can't trust? Therefore, how can you expect me to trust your instance at Heathrow? So yeah, there's that specific AI piece as well. And then it's going to come down to inevitably, I'm sure we'll see sort of inconsistent answers, and variation based on phrasing will reduce confidence for sure. There's going to have to be a huge change adoption piece, because as you say, users do default to existing tools that they know and have been working with for a long time. I think there'll be some skill gaps that we need to address as well. How do you actually ask the most effective questions to get the most effective answer as well? That there's a lot around that, around the prompts that you're using, how best to use Genie, how to get the most out of Genie and the confidence in Genie. And I think finally, the other thing we will need to look at is around safety. So I don't mean broadly at the airport. I mean in terms of ensuring sensitive or PI data is never exposed to somebody that it shouldn't be exposed to. We suddenly have this huge platform with lots of data, and now we have endless people querying and asking questions of it. Some of those answers should not be presented to certain users, right? We need to make sure that we have a good and understood access model in place. I shouldn't be able to ask, I should be able to load a load of financial employee information into a Genie space and start asking, what do the people in my team earn today? And what do other product managers at Heathrow? That kind of thing. So there's always going to be, from a data compliance and more broadly, that safety concern around how we control the classifications and the sensitivity of data. So yeah, a lot of effort will be needed alongside Genie, but I think first and foremost, it will absolutely come down to the trust in our own data. And as I say, that happens already, whether that already be in a Power BI dashboard or something else. That's the most fundamental place we need to get to, is trusting the data in the back end before more widely rolling out Genie rooms, or Genie spaces.
Thank you very much. We've got a few minutes left. I haven't seen anything come through in terms of the chat or on the Q&A. So I'll use the last couple of minutes just to highlight a couple of things in terms of roadmap, and then a couple of things that we're doing at TT to support around this space. I will quickly touch on one thing that just came to mind as you were saying about different people asking the same kind of question in different ways. We did a really interesting piece where we took some key questions that a customer had that they were asking Genie, put those through ChatGPT to say what's like a dozen different ways of asking this same question, just worded slightly differently.
Yeah.
Had that response come back, and then use the Genie API to ask those different variations of the question over and over again to Genie, and then compare the responses. There's a lot you can do on the API side of things to really kind of put that robustness around the testing approach to make sure that Genie is accurate and consistent in how it's responding to people. So definitely recommend that as a bit of a bit of a tip when it comes to testing. Right, let's just very quickly share my screen again. So a little bit on roadmap. So what's coming from a Genie perspective? The big thing is Genie Deep Research. So what Genie is very good at right now is the kind of descriptive analytics. So what has happened, what is happening right now, what's our revenue this month, last month, as you were saying, how many stands have we got open right now, and available, etc., etc. There we go. What is coming is Genie Deep Research, which gets more into the why. And helpfully the GIF has decided not to play all the way through, which is always really helpful. This is available if you go to your browser and look up Genie on the Databricks website. They do have this as a proper run through of what deep research looks like. But essentially, it takes a why question. Why is our revenue less this month than it was the month before? And it will respond with a research plan that says, I'm going to take these steps and analyze these bits of your data to try and answer this. You can review that and then run it, and then it will go through and it will run those queries, try and bring that data together, and then respond to provide more of a detailed answer, and that kind of multi-step process that you get that goes beyond just I've got a question and you've given me a SQL query that then answers that question for me. So that's the big next step as far as Genie is concerned. I think we'll see that next year rolling out, and that will really add to those kind of questions of it's helpful to be able to do some of that descriptive stuff, but if we want to get into predictive and prescriptive kind of analytics supported by Genie, then being able to answer those why questions will be really important. In terms of what we're doing around this space, so there is a link up on the screen. It'll be shared afterwards. We're really happy to support anyone who's looking to do a bit of a proof of concept around Genie. So we've got a quick turnaround proof of concept that we can come in and support with. So no hard sell, but it's definitely there as something that we offer. So please, if you do feel you want to work with us on that, then do reach out. And a quick shout out to some colleagues who are kind of continuing with the Tech Talk series. So we've got some future ones coming up. Next one on Tuesday, the 2nd of December, with a bit of a panel on reviewing 2025 and what's coming up next year. I'll drop the screen share. We're dangerously close to 11 o'clock, and minute silence and 2 minute silence is to come, I expect, for people around the country. So thank you very much, Ross, for joining me today to talk about Genie. Really appreciate your insight. Thank you very much also to everybody who joined us on the call, and everybody who signed up for the session and will receive the recording afterwards. Appreciate everybody's time, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers all. Take care.